Greetings to you all. Thank you for inviting me to address you today at the annual conference of the Global Development Network. During these 2 days, you will be sharing experience, knowledge, and ideas on biodiversity and sustainable development. The subject could not be better chosen. As you know, biodiversity is in crisis. It has been known for long that modern human society as we know it generates unsustainable pressures on the natural world. The urgency to protect nature more systematically in human activities was acknowledged way back in 1992 when the Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD, was adopted at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro that year. This Global Convention on Conservation and Sustainable Use of Biodiversity and the equitable sharing of benefits from biodiversity is ratified by 196 parties. Still in 2019, 27 years after the Rio de Janeiro, the Intergovernmental Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBS, issued an alarming global assessment report. This report was prepared by 150 leading international experts from 50 countries, balancing representation from the natural and social sciences with additional contribution from a further 250 experts and extensive consideration of indigenous and local knowledge. What did it tell us? That biodiversity is declining rapidly and globally as the result of human activities in the context of rapid population growth, expansion of global trade, and soaring demand for energy and materials. 1 million species face extinction, many within this decade, on a planet where 75% of land and counting is significantly altered, and virtually all ecosystems and species on land and sea are suffering from human-induced pressures, direct habitat conversion, exploitation of species, pollution, climate change, and introduction of alien invasive species. Why should we feel so concerned? In recent years, research has shown that by degrading biodiversity, we are putting our society and economy at risk. Biodiversity, or more broadly, nature, underpins all human livelihood. As the World Economic Forum calculated in 2020, more than half of the world's yearly economic value generation depends on at least one ecosystem service. The Network for Greening the Financial System, the NGFS, a global network of central banks and financial supervisory entities, acknowledged publicly in 2021 that nature loss is creating a systemic risk for the financial system. And as we witness the dramatic consequences of climate change nearly every day, everywhere, climate change exacerbates nature loss, and nature loss further reduces our ability to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Research from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and its Resources has shown that 30% of mitigation needed to reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal of the Paris Agreement can come from nature-based solutions. Nature is humankind's greatest ally for addressing climate change, but it will only help us if we stop destroying it. At Conference of the Parties 15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity last year, thousands of representatives from civil society, academia, as well as the business and financial world made the trip to Montreal to voice their expectation from the negotiations. They asked for an ambitious Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework supporting the case for urgent and effective action on biodiversity from all actors within society. And their voices were heard. The 196 parties to the convention committed to halting and reversing biodiversity loss by 2030 and achieving a vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. Taking stock of the world's failure to achieve precious agreements for biodiversity protection, The negotiators at COP15 agreed to a global biodiversity framework that is action-oriented with clearly defined targets and means of implementation. And this framework aims to catalyze, enable, and galvanize urgent and transformative action by governments and subnational and local authorities. But this is also a framework for all actors within society to take action. It places particular emphasis on the important role and contribution of indigenous peoples and local communities as custodians of biodiversity and as partners in conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of nature, and as population most at risk from the dramatic consequences of climate change and nature loss. It recognizes the importance of science, research, and education in order to drive the implementation of the framework, recognizing diverse worldviews, values, and knowledge systems, in particular those of indigenous peoples and local communities. In a world with finite resources, social and economic development must go hand in hand with the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of biodiversity and its benefits. The mainstreaming economic model cannot endure where the use of natural resources and the destruction of nature is merely treated as an economic externality. The role and value of biodiversity in sustaining our economy and society must be fully accounted for. A green transition is urgently needed across the world, where human activities, livelihood, social and economic development are synonymous with the sustainable, just, and regenerative use of nature. The new Global Biodiversity Framework provides for an ambitious policy agreement, but much remains to be done to ensure its rapid and effective implementation. It requires innovative thinking and approaches for ensuring that human development needs are satisfied and at the same time reducing the footprint of human activities on nature. The system will not change by itself. This requires advancing research, developing solutions, inventing new relationships between humans and nature. Much of this will need to draw from the experience and knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities, taking into account their views, values, and knowledge systems, all within robust, multidisciplinary scientific approaches. This is why social research and scientific research more generally should be supported within all geographies in line with Target 20 of the new Global Biodiversity Framework. This target calls for strengthen capacity building and development and promote technical and scientific cooperation, including through South-South, North-South, and triangular cooperation to meet the needs for effective implementation, particularly in developing countries, fostering joint technology, development, and scientific research for the conservation, monitoring, and sustainable use of biodiversity. So, this year's conference of the Global Development Network, with a focus on biodiversity and sustainable development, comes at the right time. Your work is of utmost importance to catalyze, support, and enable the effective implementation of the new Global Biodiversity Framework, and to give humanity a change to succeed in its mission of halting and reversing the loss of biodiversity by 2030 and achieving the 30 by 30 targets and putting us all on a path to living in harmony with nature by 2050. Thank you for your work, and I wish you all a rich and fruitful conference and discussions. Thank you.